So I think a lot of times, I mean, when you see me sitting next to Tabitha or Andrea at these various conventions, and what exactly is an agent. So what an agent does is I'm sort of the go-between between the producer who wants to hire the talent and the talent. So for example, 10 years ago, let's say, when My Little Pony was auditioning, they send me the sides, and what the sides are. Anyway, you can, if you want to pass this out, and just sort of. So this is in essence what you would get as a performer. So it's not really a lot. I'll sort of read this one out. So this was Mistmade, and I represent Ellie Ray. So you get little pictures on what the artist thinks that the character is going to look like. And then this is the description. Mistmade, a sorceress from a village long ago, she was a beautiful and powerful pony who trades her physical beauty and youth so that others might live in beauty. And then we have maybe 5 lines. So this is what I get this, and then I think of the people that are on my roster, and I kind of go, who on my roster do I think meets this character description? I would then email this to them, and then based on that, they would either record something at home and send me the file, and then what I do is I listen to the files and I decide, okay, I like person A, B, C, and D, and that's then what I send to DHX. Who produces My Little Pony. Then Big Jim or some of the writers would listen to the auditions for Mistmade, and then based on that, they would then bring them in for a producer-director session. And they usually will only bring about 4 people in, and at that time you would come into the studio, you'd have producers and the client in the room, and then you would maybe do the same read that you did from the MP3 that you sent in, or a lot of times they might just adjust a little bit. So I've been doing this now for 27 years. I was going to university, I had a scholarship, and my parents are European, so they decided I was going to be a doctor, and I thought, okay, that's what I guess I'm going to be. And then my roommate at the time was getting his BFA in acting, and through him I was meeting a totally different group of really interesting, creative people. And I started working in film as an assistant in extras casting. So extras casting are all the people that you see that don't have dialogue. And I did that for a summer, and then I ended up working on about 3 or 4 movies. And during that time, I realized that this was an area that I found way more interesting than being a doctor. I got my degree in university, and then I approached a talent agency because at the time, no one was really representing actors for voiceover. They were representing actors for film and TV commercials, but that was in theater. And then I noticed that there was sort of a niche that was missing, and I approached a company at the time with my idea, and they kind of said, "Sure, let's give it a try." So that some of you might not even know what a cassette is, but we're going back. And that is all of my clients would be on a cassette tape. So if I sent that out to someone and I said, "Listen to Joe Smith," I mean, it would be a nightmare for them to fast forward and rewind until they heard the slate, David Cosby, and then they go, "Oh, I gotta go forward." So started off with cassettes, and then we went to CDs, which was a lot better. But then again, if I took on a new client, I would have to produce a whole new CD to put that client on. Now, of course, with the web, we do MP3s, and I can send out my clients' demos instantaneously. So some of the people that I represent, I've been fortunate enough to represent a lot of people on the show. So Tabitha, Andrea, Peter New, Brenda Critchlow, Sam Vincent, who does Flim Flam, Marinka Hendricks, Vincent Tong, Kelly Metzger, Claire Corlett, her dad, Kazumi Evans, Shannon, Kelly Sheridan, Allie Milner, and then Ellie Ray Hennessy. So I've got a nice stable of performers.
Stable, yeah.
And for all my clients that come to these conventions, I am sort of the go-between. So the promoter contacts me and says, "Okay, we want A, B, C, and D client. What are the logistics? How much is it going to cost?" And then my job is to go back and forth and make sure that the accommodations are what I think they'd like to stay, that they have a car service, the style of plane that they're flying, if it's business class, the commitment that they have at the convention, and then also to make sure that they receive payment before they actually leave Vancouver. So we all of the people that I mentioned, we all live in Vancouver, and the only people that I can represent are people that are Canadian citizens or are allowed to work in Canada. And the main reason for that is here's Canada, this small country, and if we allowed American talent to come in, the competition would be sort of skewed a bit.
This is all up in Vancouver.
Yeah, it's all. So our office is fortunate. Our office is on a floating boat.
Really?
Yeah. And the company's called Red Talent Management, and Red, the R is for myself, Ralph, and then my two partners are Elena and Deb.
Is that on Fraser? Or?
No, it's actually in Burrell.
Oh, okay.
So we're sort of on the North Shore, and you've got the two bridges that go across.
Yeah, I've only been up there like once or twice.
Yeah, so it's on, I guess, an inlet, so it's pretty cool. There's a bunch of boats, and every so often we have killer whales go by, so it's a pretty amazing place to work.
Yeah, for those that don't know, it's not just completely random that Ponies is produced in Vancouver. Vancouver is actually a very thriving center of film and animation production. It's kind of like, I've heard people describe it as Canada's LA. And if you think about it, it's kind of geographically in the same sort of place relative to where LA is in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, and there's Vancouver is number 2 in North America now for film and TV. This goes Los Angeles, Vancouver, and then Toronto, Montreal, and then New York. And one of the main things is that we're on the same time zone, so a director or a big star could fly home after working Friday night to Los Angeles, hang out with the family, and then have a flight first thing Monday morning to be on set in 2.5 hours and not have to worry about jet lag. So that's one of the main reasons that Vancouver is such a hub. And now, over the years, before everything that was recorded or shot would be sent down to the United States to be processed, or all the special effects, and now almost the entire show is now done in Vancouver.
Yeah. So working as an agent, I think a lot of people are very familiar with the role of actor or voice actor, but maybe a lot of people might not be familiar with just why should an actor or voice actor seek out an agent? And what should they really be looking for when they do that? Is there a reason they couldn't represent themselves?
It's difficult in a number of ways because a lot of times you're dealing with money, and I think it's really difficult if someone offers you a certain amount of money for a job for you to say you want more money. And so all my performers just sort of, they just say, I'm the talent. If you want to talk about money and the logistics, you need to talk to Ralph. And I know the collective agreement. So everything that we do in Vancouver falls under a union agreement. So there's certain minimum scales that you would get. There's a certain payment schedule. You have to get paid in a certain amount of time. For TV or radio commercials, the producer pays for a geographic area, and then also decides on the networks that it's going to air on. And based on that, if it's airing, let's say if you're doing a TV commercial and it's airing on NBC during the Super Bowl, your residual check is going to be really big. If you have a commercial that's airing on a cable channel at 2 in the morning during some show on Discovery, your check is going to be that much less based on the number of people that are watching it. So what an agent does is submits you. For one thing, you'd have no idea. If you were represented by yourself, you would not be getting the audition notices. So that's one of the big things. Also negotiating the terms of your contract, making sure that they follow through with the terms of your contract, making sure that you receive the payment on time, and then a lot of times to come up with the marketing ideas. And I'll show you some examples. I have a client of mine. So what people do that want representation is they usually send in a demo. And anyone in this room that wants to do voiceover work, the first thing that you would need to do is produce a demo that showcases your work. And usually what you're going to do is, I always tell people, do not put impressions on it, because I can guarantee you they're never going to say on this, we would like another Bart Simpson. Right. But if Bart Simpson is a voice you can really do, you can look at all the characteristics that Bart Simpson has, or let's say Pinkie Pie, this manic, crazy person, and just give your own voice to it.
Yeah. The key word in voice acting is acting, right?
Yeah.
It's not just making funny voices. It really is bringing that character.
My Little Pony, I wouldn't even want to count. but you get paid additional for every voice. And a lot of times what they'll do is we'll get a script, and then the producer will say, hey, we haven't cast role A, B, C, and D, so make sure that your performers prepare something for this. So you're in the room, and then they're going to go, Sally, what's your take on Candy Crush? Do it, and then they're going to say, Bill, what about you? And then in the room, they're going to say, okay, you've got the part, which means you get an additional 50% of what you were making. So it's really good to have that range, because a lot of times they might not even tell me that there has been a role or two that hasn't been cast, and they'll just say, okay, everyone, we haven't cast this role. We'll give you a few minutes to come up with an idea, and then give us a read on what you think is appropriate. So I listen to the demo, I look at the resume, and then I bring the person in, I bring them in the booth, I have them audition the scripts that I do, I'll give them a bit of direction, and if I like what I hear, then I'll take them on as a client. To answer your question, then my job is to get the person who can hire you to bring you into the room. That's sort of my job, and then once you're in the room, it's up to you. So I had a client that came in, his name was Matt Ellis, and we're thinking, okay, what would be kind of a neat way for him to do his, at this time, CD. So he just took some simple pictures of his mouth, and then ME, and then we decided that he said, hear me, call me, again, you open this up, and then on one side is his animation demo, and one side here is his commercial demo, and then we just put some adjectives that kind of describes his voice in commercials. Young, vibrant, hip, authentic, fresh, engaging, distinct, varied, persuasive, and reliable. And those are all traits that you're going to hear when you hear his copy. So at the time, I would then mail these out. Now we would do something different, where we would send this out as an MP3, and I would say, listen to my new client Matt, attached is his demo, and then more than likely I would put his resume.
Yeah, I was going to ask how recent that was, like if CDs are actually still being used. No?
Because now, if you have a Mac, you can't even play a CD anymore. So this was sort of, and then one of my clients came in, and this I think is the coolest yet. So his name is Adrian Petrus, and on here is just a microphone, and then all my contact information is in the back. The neatest thing is,
Super cool.
So it's a little, it's probably about as thick as a credit card, but on here he also does a lot of film and television. He's in the TV series right now called The Hollow on Netflix. He's also in Dragon Prince. He's actually in a convention right now in Honolulu. So he could put so many things on here, all his pictures on here, he could put clips from the show, and anyone that gets this, they're going to plug it in, because it's just so cool looking, right? When this is an example of a submission that I got, so it did come with a cover letter. I won't say what's on this side, but it's the person's name and a phone number. And it came in an envelope. So, and it might be really good, but I mean, why should I listen to this? Like here, you're supposed to be a creative person. If I got these two, I would definitely listen to this one before this one. And that's part of the thing, is when you're trying to get representation, I've brought people in just based on the cover letter, or the intro in the email. I know that my biggest pet peeve is if they spell my last name incorrect. It's everywhere. I mean, you can go on my website, Google it.
I have a difficult last name as well, so I sympathize heavily with that.
Yeah, but you just have to spell it. I mean, that just shows me how much you've done. So, as much you haven't done. But like this one cover letter, the woman, it came, like I said, this beautiful loaf of bread. And in it, she used adjectives, I need you for my career. We can make lots of dough. I would like to see my career rise. So, and then it was this great organic loaf of bread. So based on that, I brought her in. I had another client that came in, and I'd send out all his material. No one was sort of biting when I'd say, well, do you want to see Kurt Evans? And they'd say, So I was at the liquor store, and in Canada, they sort of have those impulse purchases. They're like a small bottle, almost like what you get on a plane.
The little plane bottles, yeah, totally.
So I thought, okay, let's get some fun ones. Let's get a Sambuca, and maybe let's get the cinnamon one.
Fireball?
Fireball, thank you. Maybe some Baileys. And he tied them in a bow and then attached his business card, and it said, here's a shot if you give me a shot.
Ooh, clever. I like that.
And by the end of the week, all of the studios brought him in. So even if it's something like, here's a Starbucks card, or everyone has that sort of, at that 4 o'clock when you have to eat something sweet. So do something neat, whether it's, some gummy bears or, just something that they're going to remember your name. I had a client, his name was Dave Marsden, and he was responsible he was a DJ in Toronto. He was responsible for bringing tons of bands into Toronto in the 60s and 70s. And his handle on the radio station was the Mars Bar. You're listening to the Mars Bar on KF 100. So whatever he would do, he would go into a studio with those little Mars bars that he had out at Halloween, and then attached on the back of it was his business card with my contact info. And when he'd go in, he'd give it to the engineer, the producer, the director, and one day he had an audition, and about an hour later I got a phone call, and the director said, "Oh, Dave was in." And I went, "Yeah, he didn't bring us a chocolate bar." But then, it's a fun play on words. What's that guy's name? Is it Snickers? Is it O. Henry? And then, no, it's Mars Bar. So it's just, it's branding. I mean, that's why, as soon as we see the Nike swoosh, we know what that means. You look at the BMW. So that is what you are as a performer. You are a brand, and it's really important to establish what your brand is going to be.
So just to clarify that, because some of these examples you're giving, you have the CD, which is sort of anachronistic at this point. The card, which has that little digital plugin, which is super cool, but that's still a physical item. And you were saying that things are often done over email, so you can't really send a chocolate bar through the internet. I wish you could, but
I would say, so my job as an agent, because my clients do work way outside of Vancouver. This would be primarily for the studios that could hire him in Vancouver, which are all within 2 miles of each other.
Right.
So it's not even a matter of mailing. He could almost drop this off to 15 different studios within a couple of hours.
Does Vancouver have a TMZ equivalent, like a radius in which there's? Are you familiar with that at all? The 30-mile zone in LA. It's something to do with union, and scale pay for you have to be within a certain distance of this point in the middle of LA.
We do. It's once you go outside of the zone, so the zone is a certain, and that mainly is for film and television. Mm-hmm. You then have to pay the performer more money, travel time.
Yeah.
You have to compensate for gas.
Yeah. So the magazine TMZ, if you didn't know, it actually stands for 30-mile zone, which is that thing, but in LA. So we've been talking about demos, and we've been talking about people sort of getting in. Are there any aspiring voice actors out here in the crowd?
Wow, a lot of you.
Awesome. Who has a demo? Very cool. Yeah. So some of you go. Yeah. Good. Yeah. So some of you are already taking that first step. That's very cool to see. At what point would you say someone who is looking into getting into voice acting, at what point do they really need to have an agent? How far can you go without one?
Because a lot of times what you're going to, let's say, I'm going to say in Vancouver, let's say in Baltimore, any city that you live in, what you would probably do is you would just look, Google ad agencies or recording studios in your city, and then you go through them and you'd say this one that says does radio and TV production. You'd say probably a good place to drop off my demo. So you drop off your demo with a cover letter, maybe the coffee idea or a cookie or a muffin saying, I value your time and enjoy coffee while you listen to my demo. So probably once you start going into the studios, and let's say you start booking, then an agent is going to be way more interested in taking you on. If someone said, "Hey Ralph, I've my demo, I dropped it off at these studios, and I've gone in for 3 or 4 auditions. I've got a callback. I booked this gig." Then right away I'm going to go, "Okay, well this person has some potential. I'm going to call them in." If they've done that, then I would call the various studios, and then I'd say, "This guy, he sent me his demo. It sounds pretty good. Have you listened to it? Have you brought him in?" A lot of times they'll say, "Yeah, we brought him in. He's amazing." Which even, or a lot of times they'll call me up and say, "Ralph, we just saw this guy. You should give him a call. He's really good." So once you start booking, then it's sort of, or you're going in and you're getting the callbacks. At that point, it's probably time to get an agent, because you'll need that person to sort of take the next step and ideally negotiate you a really good contract.
Mm-hmm. As someone who's sort of, I've also had some sort of interest in that, and it's kind of gone up and down and all around over the past few years. But I know, especially, I'm sure a lot of you guys out here who are wanting to get into voice acting, something you might relate to is there's a lot of online projects. That's kind of a place where a lot of people start just collaborative works. A lot of it is fan works, who's done voice stuff or pony fan projects, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say there's somewhat of a disconnect, or at least there's a perceived disconnect, where some people might find it hard to step out of just working on these, volunteer, essentially. You're not being paid, you're just doing it for exposure or just for fun of it. There might be like a stumbling block to sort of break into doing things more commercially. Would you say there's a specific area where it's easier to start? Is it easier to start in doing commercials for radio or for television?
I would say, yeah. I mean, for animation, you pretty much have to be in the room where the show is being produced. That's why all of these people, besides Tara, live in Vancouver. They want an ensemble record. Every so often, because people take vacations, and we'll okay it through production. We'll say, okay, we'll either pick up their line, so when they're back from the vacation, we'll pick up that episode, or if they're on a real timeline, they'll say, can we arrange for them to go into a studio in Maui? With TV or radio commercials, I mean, you can live pretty well anywhere in North America as long as you have a good studio where you could record the material. So a lot of people that live maybe in smaller communities that maybe don't have a large advertising agency, you can go on things like Voices 123, and even if you go maybe onto Craigslist, maybe do some of those, or even if you've got a university, a lot of times there might be a broadcast program where they're looking someone, agree to do what they're asking you for free, and in return ask that they then send you the fully produced spot. So you'll have maybe if it's a radio or TV commercial, you're doing a narration, they'll put in all the sound effects. So at least you're getting that in return. If someone said, hey, can you do something for my little YouTube channel where I've got this animated character, say, yeah, I will, but in return, can we maybe get the fully produced spot, which then you could then use for your demo. With home studios, I mean, now the way technology is, it used to be really quite expensive to set one up, and now it isn't. You just need a fairly quiet room. Just go to any Tommy Music, just like a music store, or even if you went to Apple and said, hey, I'm planning on recording stuff from my home, what kind of software would I need, and what kind of, you've got GarageBand already on your Mac, so right there you have the software. And a lot of times a producer will just want to hear a speakerphone. So let's say I'm in my home studio, I'm going to record a commercial. A lot of times they'll just say, can I just listen to it on a speakerphone? Because they've already heard your audition, they like it, and they just might want to tweak it. And then you would send them the file. The next thing to do is something called Source Connect, which allows the studio on the other end. So while I'm talking into the mic through Source Connect, it's being recorded on their computer. And the software is cheap. And I think at one point it was maybe $100, and I think it's even gone down. And that quality is perfect because it's digital.
So completely lossless, like it gets there all in one piece. Very cool.
So that allows you to, while you're living in these smaller communities, still to work. And at one point you're going, you know what, I'm going to take it to the next level. Then you might decide on moving into a larger city that has an agent. You can go onto so many websites and see where talent agencies are in your area, and then start getting representation that way.
Okay, I want to touch on just one or two more points, and then I think we'll get into some audience Q&A. If you want to ask a question, just raise your hand real quick, just so I can get a good idea of how much time we're going to want to take. Cool. When that happens, there's a microphone over here. Actually, if you guys want to start lining up, that'll probably save us some time.
And what I think I'm going to do, which is kind of interesting, so I'm going to read an audition that I recently sent out to my clients for, I don't think it's out, called Hatchimals. Is Hatchimals? Is it popular? Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to play some of my talents auditions so you get an idea of what each one did different. So this would have gone out to, probably around 6 or 7 women. So Cassie is the character's name. The reference they're giving, she's a confident leader, glam and fashion oriented, trendy, and then they're going Elle Woods, legally blonde, only not as dumb. So that is and then there's the dialogue here. So I'm going to play you just a few auditions so you can get an idea of what each performer's take was on this.
By the way, while that's loading up, for this line lining up here, we're going to prioritize if there's any kids in the line. they can come onto the front, and anyone who's ADA, any disabilities can present as well.
My question is, what should a voice actor look for in an agent?
Well, in British Columbia, we all have to be licensed with the provincial government. So, and we have to post our number on our website. And agents, so you can first see if the agent is licensed, maybe just see how long they've been in the business. You know, a lot of them are going to probably have a website, ideally, and then you might look on their website and see who they represent, and if you see that they've got some stars on their website or people that you know that are working, then that would probably be a good agent. Yeah. Always be careful. I mean, well, we're not allowed to, but no agent should charge you any money up front, which a lot do. The only way that I make money is if my clients make money, and that's based on a percentage that I make, that I take based on what they make. So it's really important to not pay anything on events.
Hi. So I work with like a sort of an impersonal agency, 99 Modeling and Acting. They do either acting work or voice acting work plus modeling. Would you say that's a sort of a good substitute to work with them until I'm like a bit enough stable to get my own agent?
So I'm just curious, what did you mean by impersonal?
Like a lot of it is just I have to go on their website and look through their editions that they get from promoters.
Oh, I think I'm familiar with this kind of system. It's kind of like a crowdsourced sort of thing where people will put up projects and anyone can sort of submit.
No, it's not sort of, but like it's actual promoters from like different well-known media companies.
Okay.
So, but I say it's impersonal though because you have to be the one that's like you have to find the audition you want to look for, and you have to send everything out yourself, and you have to sort of like agree with them on like what content you want to do.
And do you pay them something if you get the gig?
No, you just pay the membership fee for being with them every month.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's why I'm good at my job, is that I know my clients. I'm very personal with them, and it's really important for me to know them on a lot of aspects, because then I'll know what I can submit them for. I would never send all of my clients the same audition and just say, well, send it if you think you're good for it. I would, listen to it or read this and say, you know what, I think Joe, Sam, Frank, and Bert are good for it. And that might only be 4 of the 20 men that I represent. So to answer your question, I mean, it's better than nothing, I'm saying right now. At some point you want to see the return on your investment. So if the membership is $20 a month or whatever it is, and after a year you pay $240 and you haven't made anything, then you might say, I might have to rethink what I'm going to do. All right. I got my phone hooked up here, so I'm just going to play the Cassie audition that I mentioned. Just
Give us 1 second.
Not sure if you know, but this dress is made from party. It's in my obby, and it's just kinda meh, cute, but nothing special. And I'm like, let's get some glam up in here. So I wave my arms, my wings start to glow and shine, and everyone stares. I mean, like, more than usual. Look at Cassie! Oh my god! I just do my thing and make all the blonde decorations sparkle like jewels.
Tabitha.
This is Tabitha St. Germain meeting Cassie. Not sure if you know, but this dress is made from 1,000 thread count crystal silk with crystals along the hemline, crystals down the back, and from a hair. Oh, how unexpected! More crystals! Okay, obviously I was hatched in Crystal Canyon because I am the sparkliest of all the pixies. When you're not staring at my perfect outfit, you're like, wow, did she just make her very own spectacular crystal glowing light show in the sky? Yeah, she did. Anywho, I'm at this party and it's in my honor, obviously. And it's just kind of meh. Cute, but nothing special. And I'm like, let's get some glam up in here. So I wave my arms, my wings start to glow and shine, and everyone stares. I mean, more than usual. Look at Cassie. Can you believe it? You know, I just do my thing and make all the blonde decorations sparkle like jewels.
So all of those, and so I sent in 6 women's auditions for this, and so the producer probably would have got, I'm going to say 20 to 30 auditions. And personally, I'm probably a little biased, but I would have hired any of those women. The person who ended up getting it was the first one. Caitlin ended up getting that. And that's what I say, not only when I hear demos, let's say a woman sent me her animation demo who did great, women in her 20s. What she has to realize is that she is going to go and audition with those women, and then you heard the rest of them. You know, Shannon would be going in, Andrea, Kelly Sheridan, Kelly Metzger. So I have probably the strongest female roster in Canada. So when I hear a woman's demo, I have to think, okay, is she as strong? Like, can she compete? And all of our material is on our website, and most agencies' demo tapes will be on their website. So it's really important that what you produce, you're confident with. There's some people that send me saying, like, I'm not, you know, it's not that good, but then why are you sending it to me? I mean, it just, and you've set yourself up. It might be really good, but you've set yourself up for it. So it's more than just taking a weekend workshop or, you know, taking an improv class. You know, go to the various websites of the talent agencies and where you live. Listen to the demos and say, is my material as good as this? And when you can answer that question honestly and truthful, then submit your demo.
Awesome. Right, we got about 17 minutes left, so those of you in line, try and keep your questions
there.
nice and simple.
Hello. So I have a question. How long to use like one of those demos?
How long? I would say, I mean, now people are less and less, you know, we have more and more on our plate, so I would say maybe a minute to a minute and a half. And what I will probably want to hear in that is 6 to 8 different characters. So I just don't want you to hear your version, like a 30-second version of the one voice, you know, just really fast editing. And what I'll do if we have time, I've got a couple of demos and you can get an idea of the range. Or what you can always do is anyone can just go on to Red Talent Management, Google it, let's say voice library, and then our entire library comes down and you can listen to everyone's animation and commercial demo.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
And generally those are things that are, those characters are just kind of made up to write.
Yeah, a lot of times you will, and eventually what we'll do is once the show, because a lot of times we have to sign non-disclosure agreements, so we're not allowed to mention anything until the show airs. Once it airs, and it's a public domain, then you can actually air clips from the show on your website.
Right.
So we'll eventually end up getting all stuff that you've done, and we'll take off the sort of the face. Yes, sir?
What would be I guess those. What would be some proper like vocal warm-ups for more than just acting, but like music as well?
That's a good question. I never ask that question to my clients what they do, but I notice a lot of them, if they have a really early, you know, of course, go to bed fairly early the night before if you've got a 9 a.m. session. But a lot of people have like tea and honey, like something really warm. Some people have, I call it a really wet mouth. It sounds, you hear that? So a good way if you've got it, and we have a tendency when we get nervous, sometimes our mouths hypersalivate. Thank you.
Salivate.
And if that's the case, bring a green apple with you. And you'll notice if you eat a green apple, your mouth will like dry right up.
Huh.
Green apples.
So there, perfect. Awesome, thanks for your question.
Thanks.
So, how difficult would you say the transition from mainly doing commercial work to mainly doing animation work is?
Well, I have some clients that only do animation, and then some people that just do commercial. They say, I don't have a funny voice to save myself. And then some people that might do animation, let's say a Raid commercial comes up, and it's for the Talking Wasp. So an obvious choice for me then would be to go to some of my animation clients and choose them to audition for something like that. But it's the more eggs you put in a basket, the more work that's available. So if you say, I love animation, I love narration, I also like commercial work, that's just more areas that potentially your agent can send you out so you can make money. All right? Thanks.
Something a little similar to what was asked on. It's a bit of a transition from theater to some of the stuff it's been going well so far. The theater work that I've got, like the directors says, like talk about cable and stuff. So I guess from transitioning from theater and all, what would you, or from going a bit of theater and to going to voice acting, going from projecting to going to something a little more controlled?
Well, you're way ahead of a lot of people because the best voiceover performers have a theater background, because you're going to know vocal training, you're going to know vocal rest, you've read a script, you've projected your voice, and you might have come up with different voices. In theater, you could be anything. They could have you being an old man, or they could have you with an accent. So, and you've got the confidence, because a lot of times you don't want to be nervous when you come into the room. And there's nothing more, whether it's a handshake, there's nothing that I like more than a nice firm handshake, looking you in the eyes. So you're way ahead of people because you already have a lot of the training. So I think at this point what you should do is maybe go and see if there's, if you've got a college that might have an animation program, they might need some voices in it. A lot of time that's posted on Craigslist. I know we've got a paper called the Georgia Straight, which is like a community paper, and in the back they have where the classifieds are. A lot of times they have listings for voices that they're looking for. So I think that would be a good transition.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've also heard improv classes, doing improv comedy are an excellent source for
Really
spontaneity. Maybe.
Do you feel that as far as voice acting, we should move to more voice acting hotspot like LA? They should make it their goal.
That is that's everyone's goal. Even people when are off, people in Vancouver. LA has this. Oh my God! If I go to LA, I'm going to be famous. When I can guarantee you, the resumes that these people that I represent are far greater than probably a lot of the talent. So I would, you could say that would be your goal, depending on what you want to do. Advertising, I would say you probably maybe want to do Chicago or New York, because a lot of the ad agencies come out of the East Coast. Animation is going to be Los Angeles. But maybe sort of see what city you live close to that might have a bit of a market, and then from there, if you start doing really good, you can easily get representation. I've got clients that live in Vancouver but have representation in Los Angeles because they've got working status. They've got representation on the East Coast of Canada as well as the U.S.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ryan. I was wondering how some easy signs on how you can tell a fake agency from a real agency.
Well, one thing, first, if they ask money up front, and there are some that we have costs to send out the material, that's a big red flag. If they have a class attached to the school, that they're going to offer, that is a red sign. How long have they been in business? And you can ask them. It might say on their website if it's, if they've been in business for 6 months. It could be that maybe the agent has come from a different agent, so maybe just see how long the agent has been in in the industry. I mean, the funny thing is with voiceovers, actually, you, in essence, you hire me to get you work, but I get to decide on who hires me, which really doesn't happen in, I can't think of many jobs, maybe a lawyer. So you should never feel uncomfortable asking the person that you have hired questions. You know, how long, what's your background? You know, and the person says, I've got a theater degree, you're going, well, they've got to be knowledgeable. How long have you been doing this? You know, what are some of your clients? I would appreciate those questions because it looks like the person has done a bit of homework.
Ralph, is there a difference between an agency and an agent?
No, because I'm an agent that works in a talent agency.
I see.
And there's 5 agents that work at Red Management.
Thank you.
You actually mentioned this during earlier, but I wanted you to expand on this. So you said when we have to, like, we're going to, like, say certain agencies like radio, they said they want to hear our regular voices. Like, what do you mean? Like, is it conversational? Is it like like sort of speaking a certain story? Like, what did you mean by that per se?
Maybe what I'll do is I'll just quickly play you a commercial demo, and that'll give you an idea of what I meant. And this is a client of mine who works a lot.
Itchy skin distracting you? Cortisone 10. Number 1 doctor recommended. Its fighter works fast. And it lasts 10 full hours. All my helps. So you can stay focused. I've been a son, a waiter, a delivery man, a writer, a musician, an entrepreneur, and a father. The world is changing. From digital transformation to cloud migrations to security breaches to IoT and machine learning. Begging the question, is your network providing the right one for the job? What V2 really cares about is what you have to offer. Like a stevia plant, small and humble, with a surprising secret to share. Sweetness, trivia sweetener. Now you can stream it.
So that sort of gives you an idea.
That was very helpful. Thank you very much for that.
Hello.
Hello there.
Okay. So if you're starting fresh, how do you put together a demo reel if you haven't really had work? Are you like just taking? I mean, you like Alaska, you haven't touched this, but do you just take other work and see how you do it?
Totally. I mean, that's what I suggest from a lot of my clients. Let's say, I'm just going to say men's fitness, because you're a guy. Go through it, and you're going to have probably an ad in there for Gatorade. And it's going to have the copy. There's going to have the words on it. You're probably going to have maybe a deodorant. You're going to flip through. There might be a beer ad. You're going to flip through. You might have a car ad. So you can tear those out because you're going to have the words written that describe the product in that. If look at things that you buy right off the top, because that's going to be an easy sell. Like you said, if you love your Ford Mustang, then I would suggest do a Ford Mustang spot. If your favorite restaurant is McDonald's, then do that. But I had a client who was vegan, and I've got a client who is an AA member. So as much as I would never suggest him for a beer commercial, because all of the stuff that he has been dealing with would come through in his read. So look and see what you think of the product. So let's say I said, can you go for a Pinto commercial tomorrow? When I owned a Pinto, was in the shop more than I then change it. And then if I said, okay, what car would you want? You said, oh my God, I love a Mercedes. Then imagine what you're doing. The read would be as if you were talking about a Mercedes. But yeah, so just, grab things, take stuff off the radio or the TV, and then just do your own voice.
Thank you.
All right, so unfortunately we've only got a few minutes left. I'm gonna have to say we can probably only take these next 5 here. My apologies to everyone else in line. And let's try and keep them quick, just so we can get through everybody.
Hi, I have a demo reel that I'm actually very pleased with. It's a dramatic reading of Jabberwocky and all of my voicings, characters, dialects, and so forth. I'm wondering though just how produced it needs to be in terms of underscoring, sound effects.
I would say as long as the recording quality is good, that's the most important thing. I don't want it to sound like you recorded it in your bathroom, while you're underneath your sink. So as long as you could, as long as and you know, you can have someone to do that afterwards, because your agent might say, you know what, I like this voice, this voice, this voice, but not the other ones. But I mean, you're going to be brought in on your acting. They're not bringing you in because you're a good engineer.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
As you said earlier, to do it for free in exchange for a fully produced spot. Can you elaborate more on what a fully produced spot was?
I assume with a music track. So let's say, so for a radio commercial, you'd hear the music. You might hear a toilet flushing if it was for a toilet cleaner.
That we shouldn't record in the bathroom.
Or you know, for someone who's might be doing has a YouTube channel, they're asking you to do an animated voice. Then a lot of those ones, if they're producing it, where you might hear, you know, he comes running in the room and he slides, and then he's putting the special effects of him going or music. Just ask that they send that to you, and in essence, you're getting a free spot for your demo. So you just want it more than just your voice on it. So it might have music and special effects on it.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Hi. Hey there.
What do you look for when you listen to a male voice every day?
I would look, I mean, first of all, their voice quality, their understanding of the copy. Like when you listen to Michael, who I just played there, you heard sort of 4 different reads there. You heard him as the father, when he lists off all the things that he is. You heard him talking about some products that felt very dear to him. So a believability that when I hear you say that, I want to buy the product, I think is probably the most important thing. Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi. My name's Julius. I've done voice acting online for years. I've been working towards this craft, and I really wanted to get into the animation industry, but I live in Boston. There is no voiceover industry there whatsoever. And I guess I'm kind of at a loss. Like, what would you say would be a good idea for someone to do if you live in a location that does not have a voiceover industry?
Do you have like a home studio based on?
Yeah, I do.
And if I wanted to listen to you remotely, could I listen to you remotely?
Yeah.
Okay. So then I would, you know, maybe then look at a market that's closer to you that might have. I mean, New York, I'm guessing, is fairly close.
4 hours.
Yeah. And then maybe contact some of the agencies. Say, you know, you would in your cover letter, you would probably list down all the specifications of your studio. I've got a home studio, but I currently live in Boston. Here's my material. A lot of times, I mean, I've got a client that lives maybe 2.5 hours out of Vancouver, and when he gets a series, I can usually get a producer to maybe record him every other episode. So, for example, let's say if you had to fly to New York, instead of flying every week, because most shows we record once a week, they might agree to fly you up maybe every 3rd week, and then they would record 3 of your episodes. But I think send them your material, also the specifications of your studio, but also end it saying that you'd be more than happy if you were to book a gig and if the client required you, that you'd come into the city.
All right, but for animation in particular,
animation is gonna be the same thing, is because they'll want you in the room, and that's you know,
the tricky part.
Yeah, and usually for the first 2 or 3 sessions while they're developing the characters, and then after that they get a little bit more lenient. A lot of the producers aren't in the room at that point. They end up going back to Los Angeles or New York, but once they sort of get the repertoire going amongst the cast, then usually there'll be a little bit more, they'll allow you to record remotely.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the questions, guys. Ralph, I wish we had more time. Is there anything going on later this weekend that maybe people could check it out if they had any more questions for you?
No, but one thing I will mention, so I know that some of you have demos, and you're more than welcome to send them to me at the talent agency. Maybe just mention in there, because I get a lot, just in the cover line, you could say, was that your talk at BronyCon? Here's my demo. And, but I will give you honest feedback. So be prepared for that. I'm not going to, I mean, you've heard the clients that I represent, and I'll honestly tell you if I think, if I hear something, I'll say, if I hear something, I think you should add more of this, and maybe you should delete that, but sort of as my way of giving back to the community. If you have something, feel free to email it to me, and I'll take a listen to it with some honest feedback.
Awesome. All right. Ralph Strike, thank you so much for coming. Let's give him a big warm round of applause. And everyone enjoy the rest of BronyCon 2019.